Welcome back to the shop, guys. This video is in response to a couple comments that I've got about people asking how to get the wedge into the eye further, or into the tongue further. And I'm going to show you how I do it. Through my travels with learning how to hang axes, I've learned a lot of things, and what I found is, and I've still got a lot to learn. And what I'm showing you guys is just what I do. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You know that. So what I found through my travels is that it's hard to get all of the information in one video. There's so many little tiny factors that come into play when you're hanging a head, just when you're hanging a head, that it's hard to stuff all that into one video. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break down how to get the wedge seated deep into the tongue, into the kerf, right? This cut is the kerf. So first off, you only have so much space inside of the eye. Now, you can thin that wedge to a less of a degree, and it'll slip in a lot easier, as opposed to thinning the tongue down. Now, the issue there is when you go hammering that wedge into the kerf, and then once you turn it upside down, put it on the concrete or on an anvil, and you're going to hammer the top in, when you have a really thin wedge, it's prone to crack. Pardon my hands, I got in a fight with a raccoon, and they're all chewed up. So first off, we want the wedge to completely fill out the kerf if we can, okay? The further that wedge goes down in the kerf, the wider the wood gets, and the more contact that the sides of the tongue contact the inside of the eye. So with a set of calipers, we can look, and I've got about 21 millimeters right at the bottom where the axe head is fully seated. And then right at the kerf, 19 millimeters. Halfway up the kerf, 18 millimeters. This line is where the top of the axe head is going to seat, roughly. And I've got 17 millimeters. So I've achieved a taper on the tongue. The tongue is actually tapered up, and that's going to give room for the wedge. And that's going to give room for a nice thick wedge that's not going to crack on us, that's not going to smash on us, okay? So to do that, a lot of the time when I'm doing my finish tuning on a tongue, I run a 1x30 belt sander, okay? Now, if you don't have a belt sander, and then you can still get a little carried away with a belt sander. So for that real final touch, when you're really tuning it in, I just use a sanding block, okay? I'm making sure that I apply more pressure to the top than to the bottom. And we can see here I got a little bit carried away. This is some ash, it's really soft. So as I'm sanding down, if I go too far, I'm gonna thin out beneath the kerf too much. And in all actuality, we really want those marks. We really want the axe head to fit firmly all the way up to the bottom of the kerf. And sometimes that takes a lot of time, and it's a huge pain in the ass. So something you want to focus on, and I'll show you with the head on the tongue. This back line right here, I try to get this line in as much contact with the eye as possible. And again, I've sanded more than I should have on this. But I got another trick for when you over sand, and if you're going to have voids inside of the eye, I'll show you how to deal with that. All right, I'm going to get this head on the tongue and show you what it'll look like when the handle is hung on the tongue. All right, so we can see right here, we have contact about 1/8 of an inch to the left of the kerf and 1/8 of an inch to the right of the kerf. And then it starts tapering out, okay? And the reason why is this whole section of the tongue is gonna move over, and we gotta leave room for it. But we also wanna stay in contact on the back side here. And again, it's the same on this side. You can't see it as well because one, this side is less of a gap, and two, the lighting isn't showing it as well. Now this side has less of a gap. That's okay because the wedge is going to make it even, okay? So basically it's a 2mm gap on this side, a 2mm gap on this side, and about a 1mm gap of the kerf. So that's 5mm width of wedge that we need to at least make this side and this side touch the steel of the head. This line on the wedge is about at the top of the axe head. So here we're about 8mm, and where it's going to bottom out at on the other side is about 8mm. If we can pound this wedge to where this line meets at the top of the axe head, we basically have 3mm of compression in the tongue and in the wedge. Let's see if we can get it there. So I'm not going to touch a whole bunch on prepping a wedge because there's a lot more to it than what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say pertains to getting the wedge to seat into the axe tongue deeper, okay? So when you look at these wedges, a lot of the time you'll see saw marks on them, okay? We can see lines and marks left over. So one, you can sand it down to get your degrees proper, to get your angle proper, right? If you feel you need to sand it down, you can sand it down. Also, if your wedge isn't smooth, it's just going to create friction, okay? So what I'll do is I'll take my sanding block and I'll just sand that wedge down smooth with 120 grit. Okay, hit it on both sides. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And a person could make the argument that by sanding this down, it goes in easier, well, it'll come out easier. Okay, so that's a valid argument. Now, on that subject, you can put in a cross wedge. You can put in a metal step wedge, a barrel wedge, whatever it may be, and that's going to lock that in place more. Now, more so, whether you're putting glue or linseed oil in it, both of them are going to glue the wedge in place, okay? Once that linseed oil, it gets tacky, it gets hard, it polymerizes, okay? So that's gonna hold it in place. So my argument is make it smooth and let the oil or the glue hold it in place. And if you need to, put a metal wedge in that. Now, moving on, we want two things with this wedge. One, we want it to go in as far as we can get it because we want to fill out that kerf and get as much of that tongue wood in contact with the inside of the axe eye. To do that, we've smoothed out the sides, but our width also matters, okay? From here to here. We want the wedge to be a 1/2 millimeter, you know, a 1/16 of an inch, just an 1/8 of an inch. We want the wedge to be bigger than the eye. I've already cut this wedge and it's close to 1 millimeter too wide. But we've got our sanding block. So we've got these sharp edges on our wedge. And those are going to hang up, especially in the front of the eye where it starts getting real narrow. So I'm just going to take my sanding block at an angle and I'm going to sand that sucker down a little bit. Now, you can really get serious about shaping this. I've seen some people that shape the front to the front of the eye and the back of the wedge to the back of the eye of the head. Here, I'm gonna let the eye of the axe head trim this off, which will mostly just be on the front. So, all right, we got our marks, we got our wedge sanded down, and it's real smooth. So the next step, I'm gonna show you how I apply linseed oil to aid in lubricating the wedge so that it slides in easier. And it's a multi-purpose application here. And I'm gonna show you right now. So we're killing two birds with one stone here. First off, we're gonna use the linseed oil in this syringe to lubricate the kerf and the wedge so that the wedge goes in easier. Second off, I'm going to pre-soak the tongue of the wood now, as opposed to after I get it wedged, everything's hung, and then trying to either put this in a bucket of linseed oil or slowly put drops on it and to get it to soak. So I'm going to put about 8 millimeters, correction, I'm going to put about 8 milliliters of pure boiled linseed oil between the eye of the axe and the tongue on both sides, and I'm also going to just drip it into the kerf. Now the key to this is you have to have the bottom of the eye sealed up on the handle. And if not, it's all going to run out. So this will hold boiled linseed oil for a long time, as long as there's no air inside of it. So let's get to it. I have found that this is the most effective way to soak the eye. You know, we really want to soak. We want to soak it before, while we still can. You know, while it's open, it's just so much easier to get that oil in there now than after it's been wedged. So what I'll do is I'll sit here. I'll soak it for. Once I fill it up, I'll leave it in there for a half hour. And this is ash, so it's really porous, and it'll soak it up fast. So we just now, I try not filling it all the way to the top, because once you put the wedge in, that wedge is going to displace that oil and it's going to come out the top and it's going to make a mess, which isn't a bad thing because you still got to oil the handle. So whatever comes out, that'll go onto the handle, and that's fine. I found probably 3 milliliters is good for a hatchet, and 5 to 8 is good for a full-size eye. So I'm gonna set this for about a half hour, and we'll get back to it and see how it's doing. We can see a little bit of oil seeping through the bottom there, but we don't have any big runs. So that's a good sign that we're sealed up real nice, and it's soaking into the handle. All right. I suppose you could soak your wedge up also, and that would help. Now there's still oil in there, so we're going to see some oil come out, and that's fine. Like I said, it'll drip out, and it'll drip down the head and onto the handle. If I wanted to wait longer and let all that soak up, I certainly could. No oil seeping out yet, so that's good. All the oil that's in there is going to stay in there, and it's just going to soak up this tongue wood. It'll soak into this eye. I'm sure it'll reach some sort of equilibrium, and once it dries, it's going to harden, and it's just going to hold that head on that much better. All right, I'm going to flip it upside down and pound it home. So I often find this to be the most stressful part of hanging, because you did all this work to get the handle built, the head's all cleaned up, and if this wedge doesn't set right, it's discouraging. So this is the most stressful part. All right, so we're shooting to get that line, I don't know, within a ½ inch of the top here. It'll make me happy. We'll see how far we go. Doesn't always go how you want it, right? This is the line that was going to meet up right here. So in reality, we're about a ½ inch short of the wedge bottoming out the kerf. And to me, that's fine. I stopped. I've definitely got the width, you know, it's hung proud. It sticks out up here wide. So I'll cut it off, leave it hung proud, and we'll take a look and see what it looks like. See if everything's filled out in there. So we can see here that it filled it out nicely, And like I said, we're about a 1/2 inch short of where we want to be. We can see that we're filled out all on the top and the bottom. That's because we left this a little bit longer than it needs to be. We do have a little crack right here, and I think that was from just, you know, just pounding it a little bit too hard, but that's okay. She's filled in. So next, oh, before I forget, if you guys are wondering what the heck we're doing with a 3.5 pound head on a 18.7 inch handle, so this would be a house axe, but a house axe would have a 2 pound boy's axe head on it, and we've got a big boy on here. So let me know in the comment sections if you think that the name mansion axe is right for this, right? Because a mansion's bigger than a house, and this is definitely bigger than a house axe. Definitely a sweet little way to go if you want a handle hung. You got it, and it's not taking up a bunch of room. But more so, you've got a house axe, split and kindling. You know, if you're working something down, I've got it shaped right here so that you can choke up on it, and you can split kindling. And then if you want, you can single hand it, right, and put some serious force on a piece of wood. So that's that. I'm gonna end this with oiling the top of the tongue. Let's get to it.